Hello my friends and welcome to the channel. With Elden Ring's Shadow of the Erdtree expansion just around the corner, I know for a fact that I'm not the only one out there who's grinding to put the finishing touches on a few character builds to get ready for the next chapter of our adventure. I may or may not be somewhat addicted to creating characters in Souls games, so for me, deciding on what character that I wanted to start Shadow of the Erdtree with was really a painful choice. Every build offers a new way to experience the game, radically changing how any given encounter can play out, and that's one of my favorite parts about From Software games. There are few things more satisfying to me than clicking all the pieces of a cool new build together and seeing how it fares against the toughest enemies in the lands between. In this video, I want to do a little showcase of the first 3 builds that I plan on taking through Shadow of the Erdtree. Inevitably, 30 minutes into the DLC, I'll find some cool new weapon or spell and respec to something completely different. But I'll cross that bridge when I get there. I'm not claiming that these builds are the best ones out there, or even the best builds that I've ever created. But I will say that these are 3 of my favorite builds that I've ever made. Either because they use my favorite school of magic, they have a unique flair to them, or they just change the gameplay in a way that I really enjoy. If you take one thing away from this video, I hope it's a desire to take your favorite concept for an Elden Ring character and just make it happen. Hyper-optimized builds are fun, but I guarantee you'll be more satisfied finishing a tough fight with a thematic build that you can call your own. So with that out of the way, let's get this started with my first build for Shadow of the Erdtree, which is funnily enough the first character I started Elden Ring with back in 2022. Without fail, pyromancy or fire magic always ends up being my favorite thing in these games. It's simple and it's destructive. You click the button, you blow stuff up, and it takes massive damage. I have this tradition of starting every Souls game with a Pyromancer build. I beat Dark Souls for the first time with a Pyro build, and then I did the same thing in Dark Souls 2, 3, and then again in Elden Ring. While flame spells don't have the same unique identity that they did in the Dark Souls days, now just being grouped in with the other faith spells as an incantation, that doesn't mean they're any less powerful or fun to use. Actually, I might say Elden Ring's fire magic is even more fun than I remember it being back in Dark Souls. With new features like being able to charge up spells for more damage, and quite a few more items that can directly buff your fire damage, there's a lot of tools to help pump up the damage numbers, and that's just fun all by itself. On top of that, flame art infused weapons can really scale up to some incredible damage numbers, giving pyro builds access to some awesome melee damage as well. This character is level 200 at the time of making this video. My highest stat is faith at 80 points, then vigor at 60, mind at 37, strength at 36, and dexterity at 20. At a lower level, around like 150, I would just drop the strength and dex, and maybe reduce mind a little bit. For equipment, I'm running the Erdtree seal, the Giant seal, and the Godskin Stitcher infused with flame art to gain faith scaling and fire damage. At 60 faith and above, the Erdtree seal starts to outperform other options, so I use it as my primary casting device. However, if you equip another seal that buffs a specific type of magic in the other hand, you can actually gain the extra damage from that effect as well. So for my build, I use the Giant seal for the extra fire damage, but this same idea can be used for lightning magic or the black flame incantations with other seals. For my melee weapon, I really love the Godskin Stitcher with the flame art infusion on any pure faith build. It gets a B scaling in faith when fully upgraded, and on my character, I'm getting over 700 AR with it. For the Ash of War on this build, I'm just using Flaming Strike, which hits for a lot of base damage and also adds a flame buff to the weapon, increasing the damage of follow-up hits as well. For my talismans, I'm using the Radagon icon for faster casting, the Godfrey icon to power up the charged fireballs, the Phlox Canvas talisman for the incantation buff, and the Shard of Alexander to increase the damage of the Flaming Strike. Then for my Physic Flask, I'm using the Flame Shrouding Crack tier as well to increase fire damage by another 20% for boss fights. My main spells are of course Giant's Flame Take Thee and Flame of the Fell God, but at 80 faith you have access to basically every other faith spell, so I'm also running Black Blade and Ancient Dragon Lightning Strike to take care of fire resistant enemies, which are honestly a pain when you're playing a pure Pyromancer build. Overall, this is still my favorite caster build in Elden Ring, and blasting bosses and groups of enemies with a charged fireball never really gets old to me. For my second build that I've gotten ready for Shadow of the Erdtree, I've harnessed the ancient power of death magic and the mysterious black Ghostflame to deadly effect. While Pyromancy focuses on dealing huge bursts of damage, the Ghostflame Sorcerer takes more of a slow burn approach to things. This character basically uses the entire arsenal of weapons and magic acquired from the Deathrite birds, a type of world boss that can only be found at night, and one that has very interesting background and lore that much smarter people have discussed in much greater detail than I can. What most of these weapons and spells have in common is an ability to spread ghost flame across the battlefield, which deals damage to anything it hits, lingers on the ground for damage over time, and builds up frostbite as well, which can then result in huge bursts of damage. It can be tricky to get used to, but especially against large bosses who end up standing in the ghost flame, it can deal a crazy amount of damage in a very short period of time. This character is around level 185 at the time of making this video. My highest stats are Intelligence and Vigor, both at 60, then Faith at 43, Mind at 35, Endurance and Dexterity at 20, and Strength at 15. My main weapon is the Death's Poker, a greatsword which has the unique skill Ghost Flame Ignition. This allows you to either make one giant ghost flame explosion or create a straight line of burning ghost flame on the ground. This skill scales off intelligence, and between the base damage and the frostbite damage, it really packs a punch. My other main piece of equipment is the Prince of Death's Staff, a sorcery catalyst that increases the scaling of death sorcery, including the explosive ghost flame spell. The two main spells I use on this build alongside the staff are Explosive Ghost Flame and Ancient Death's Rancor. Explosive Ghost Flame creates one massive explosion at the center, and then it sends out multiple streams of ghost flame in every direction. It has a slow cast, but it's very powerful and it knocks down enemies as well. Ancient Death's Rancor is more of a long-range spam type of spell, and it's actually pretty useful for building up poise damage against bosses. For talismans on this build, I'm running the Shard of Alexander and the Carrion Filigreed Crest to buff up the Ghost Flame Ignition and let me cast it more often. Then I'm running the Graven Mass Talisman for extra sorcery damage and the Radagon icon for faster casting time. I'm also using the Magic Shrouded Cracked Tier as well for 20% additional magic damage from the sorceries and the Ash of War on the Death's Poker. Overall, this build is one of the most unique and fun that I've ever played with myself. Faster, smaller enemies can really be a pain to hit with the Ghost Flame, but most bosses are honestly a breeze with this build, because you just kite them around in the Ghost Flame until they eventually die from the continual frostbite damage. For my third and final build that I'm really hyped to take into the DLC, I have something that I've always wanted to try in a Souls game, a pure lifesteal focused build. Fortunately, Elden Ring actually provides enough sources of lifesteal to make this not only viable, but honestly pretty damn good. When all sources of your lifesteal are active, you can gain back almost 800 HP from killing a single enemy, which is kind of insane. This effectively allows you to just tank through hits, trade blows, and just get back to full HP after taking out a couple enemies. This character is about level 185 as of making this video. My highest stat is Vigor at 60 points, and then Faith, Dex, and Strength all around 40 or 45 points to max out damage from my main weapon. Next, I have 30 Mind to be able to spam the Ash of War, and 25 Endurance to support my equip load. For my main weapon, I'm using the Blasphemous Blade, which is easily one of the best weapons in the game, period, boasting amazing damage and a great unique ability, which actually heals you every time it hits an enemy. The sword itself also gives you HP back when you kill an enemy as well, so this is effectively two sources of lifesteal from one piece of equipment. Next, I have the Serpent God's Curved Sword in my offhand. This is almost never used as a weapon. It's just equipped to gain its effect to heal you upon defeating an enemy, so now we're up to 3 sources of lifesteal. For talismans, we start off with the Taker's Cameo, which, you guessed it, restores HP upon defeating enemies. So now we have 4 different sources of lifesteal. For the other 3 talismans, I'm using the Erdtree's Favor +2 for the extra base stats, the Shard of Alexander, and the Carrion Filigreed Crest to buff the Ash of War and make it cheaper to cast. The final piece of lifesteal on this build actually comes from Rykard's Great Rune, which gives you a 5th source of healing from every single enemy that dies. So with the Great Rune active, when killing an enemy with the Taker's Flame Ash of War, I regain almost 800 HP, Because of this, I think this is going to be a great build for exploring places in the DLC, so I don't have to rely on the flask to heal after every single fight. I'm also running the Flame Shrouded Crack tier in my Physic as well to boost the fire damage of the Blasphemous Blade by another 20%. And that basically covers it for the 3 builds that I plan on taking through Shadow of the Erdtree first. I hope you got some inspiration for making characters of your own, or at least enjoyed this little showcase of 3 of my favorite Elden Ring builds. Let me know what you think of the builds down in the comments, and if you have any sneaky tips to make them even better, I will not say no to that, because I will always take some more Elden Ring knowledge. While you're at it, tell me about your favorite builds, because I love nerding out about this stuff. Thanks for checking out the video. You can find a link to my Twitch stream down below, and my Discord server if you want to be notified of when I go live. And until next time, stay safe out there, Tarnished.